is the third year he and I have worked on this Capital Classroom project together. And Mr. Dawson, do you want to do the introductory brief, or shall I?
Why don't you go ahead and do it? By the way, it's nice seeing you again. Nice to be back working with you for another year.
Welcome back. So I'm Mike Moran. I'm a contract lobbyist. I represent a variety of organizations. My client list includes, in Washington State, the Confederated Tribes of the Colville Reservation, King County Assessor John Wilson, the Washington State School Retirees Association, the Washington Association of School Principals, and the Washington Association of School Directors. For those three education organizations, I do compensation and pension policy and healthcare, mostly because, like me, they're old. And then for the Colville Tribe, I do a variety of stuff, mostly environmental protection, water rights, and governance, constitutional law. And then for King County Assessor, we do fairly direct property tax and administration issues for local government. This is my 35th legislative session. I'm 56 years old, so I've been doing this since I was 20. Either working as an intern in 1983. I think Dawson wasn't even born yet in 1983.
76.
So I've been around a long time. What I try to do with this class as your lobbyist, a lot of lobbyists that work with Capital Classroom have you monitor an issue and you watch it, and you may come down and testify on the budget or provision. I've actually tried to have you guys run bills, that we write a bill and we run a bill, because I think you'll learn more about the process by actually getting your hands dirty and seeing how you draft proposals, how they're vetted, and how they get to the hearing stage. We generally don't have enough time to run the bill completely. You guys will be out of this class. In this case, you'll be in the class till the end of session. But when the sessions run into April and stuff, it gets past your curriculum time. Now, I'm going to have the folks here at TVW pop up a panel of legislation to show you, and watch your screen here, and I'll speak to it here through the magic of television and electrons. So stand by. What you're going to see are the bills that have already been filed by the legislature, and they're called pre-filed, and they cover a variety of topics. In many cases, these are bills that were being worked on over the summer by interest groups and are being prepared in advance for a submission. Throughout this, you'll find a variety of things. There's an opiates bill in there. There are some proposals to change when the legislature starts and when other considerations. There are a number of tax proposals and a number of regulatory proposals, agriculture, interior design, condo association rules, all sorts of stuff. And I wanted to give you guys this, and there is a link to this to Mr. Dawson's inbox, so you can print this out and look to see if there's anything that jumps out at you. This class, and I should say Mr. Dawson's class in previous iterations, has covered a mandatory food recycling program for collecting food waste and composting. It has run higher education budget bills to have the state pay for your AP tests and/or your SAT tests, and a variety of other education policies. You're the client. The really cool thing is you guys get to pick what you want to do. I do have to keep you on a tight timeline. You should have a preliminary decision in place by the 10th of January. We should know what we're doing by then. And trust me, with Christmas and everything else in the middle of that time's going to fly. I'm going to stop here and let you guys talk about who I'm talking to and everything else.
Okay, so I'm Yael.
I'm Millen.
Hi, guys.
Hi.
So
why don't you tell them what we've already done with our 2 meetings?
okay, so we met with Senator Cooter and Senator Goodman, Representative Goodman, and talked about some of our bills.
Yeah, we presented a few ideas. We've represented the composting one that you already mentioned, as well as a few other ideas about Columbus Day and some health standards in the cafeteria. and things like that. But we were wondering, Senator Cooter seemed to express some interest in the composting bill, and we were wondering if you've heard anything about that, either whether it's going to be presented, like a new version of it is going to be presented by Senator Cooter, or if Senator Palumbo is going to be representing it again this year. If you happen to know anything about that.
I can think, the bill is in the system, so it can be brought up from hearing again. A lot of times when we revisit a bill, we actually go back, look at the original vehicle, draft, fix little things that need to be fixed, and reintroduce it. Last year, the composting bill had some opposition from the superintendent of public instruction and the garbage and recycling industry, because they were afraid that they'd have to pay. It was an unfunded mandate, which is a polite way to say, I don't want to pay for this. But it is a possibility. Cooter is in the policy committees that could run the bill. Are you guys really that interested in Indigenous Peoples Day?
I noticed that on the pre-filed bills list actually as well. I was surprised to see it. I don't know. Are we?
We had a few students who presented that idea because we knew it's a short session and money's going to be an issue for this session. So it was like an idea that is cheap, it's not going to cost anything, and could be something that we could get behind and work through. So it was one of the 6 ideas that we had come up with. That
bill's going. John McCoy, who's a member of the Tulalip tribes in the 38th district, which is 1 district or 2 north of you, will be one of the leaders on that bill. I would certainly be on the Senate side. On the House side, David Sawyer is from Tacoma, and he does a lot of work on Native American issues in the caucus, although he's not a Native American himself. He works with a law firm that does a lot of Native American work on treaty rights and indigenous acts. So that bill will be going places. One I was going to ask you to look at, if you wanted to pick up something and work it and just advocate for it, would be Senate Bill 6003, which is concerning breakfast after the bell programs in public schools. Breakfast after the bell is basically getting meal programs into schools in your early 0-hour times, so that people that are particularly students on free and reduced price lunches have access to breakfast. Also, students like yourselves that may not be on free or reduced lunches can come buy breakfast and have it and start your day at school. That bill has been around a few times. It's going to run again. And these are examples of bills that you could quickly read and decide if you want to support. And then the class really works on lobbying the bill from electronically via email and appeals. And then also, we will talk about bringing you down for a public hearing to testify on the bill if you so desire. That's kind of the easy, instant bake mix approach. We pick a vehicle, we decide we like it or we don't like it, and we come and we work on that issue. That's a pretty clean process. Writing a bill separately is exciting but messy, and you may not be around to see what happens at the end. So that's the one thing about the food recycling composting bill. It could become a legacy of Mr. Dawson's, as in pushes. It's like football, 3 yards in a cloud of dust. Each class moves the bill another couple of yards down the process. I would love to do either approach, but you guys are further along than other classes I've had with you so far. I'm excited that you actually have some concepts in front of you. But yeah, the Indigenous Peoples Day bill will be heard. It'll be heard in the Community Development and Tribal Affairs Committee of the House. Cindy Ryu, who's a representative from the 21st District next door to you in the Mukilteo area, will be the chair of that committee. Mr. Sawyer sits on the committee. So the bill will have a hearing, and it'll be in January sometime. So if you guys choose that one, that's the one thing. If you choose an existing bill, as your lobbyist, I do the following things. One, I check in with the prime sponsor to determine what their project the bill is. Two, I let the prime sponsor and supporters know that my class supports the bill and wants to help on the lobbying effort. And then three, I sit down with you guys and Mr. Dawson and try to sketch out what the calendar would be so that it's not a last minute. You get 24 hours to decide if you're coming to Olympia and how you get down here. So that's That's kind of the issue where we're at. But yeah, we're in a really good place for that. Normally at this point in the conversation, I usually go strict question and answer so you guys can flesh out all the stuff you need to know from me.
Sure.
So we were wondering if you got the chance to talk to Representative Goodman about if he was willing to think about sponsoring any of the bills we presented to him.
No, that's on my to-do list. I will follow up with Roger.
You mentioned a couple things about the composting bill as last year, so it was unfunded as well, and then you said that it's still on the table to be reintroduced this year. It would be reintroduced as the same bill from last year?
No, let me clarify this. The bill is before a committee. You would then ask the committee to reschedule the bill for a hearing. Now, the composting bill in the Senate got to Ways and Means and died on cutoff. So it actually went back to the Senate Education Committee, and then I would go to the committee chair on that bill and ask her to remove the bill and try to move it back into Ways and Means so we can have a discussion of how to take care of this. The fiscal note was I think $15 million statewide, but there was no line item in the state's budget to pay for this thing, and that was where the opposition came from.
Right.
But one of the things we talk about when we do this is you bring up a problem, and if people accept that it's a problem worthy of solution, then they'll find the money. I mean, but you have to have that conversation, and having it, a lot of bills go 2, 3, 4 times through this process before they become law. So it would be nice to get it through and send you guys down to a bill signing this year. But to be very candid, this is again a process where we have to get to Ways and Means and then have them find the money to pay for this.
So, because we presented our idea to Senator Cooterer with kind of some modifications from last year's version of making it more like only districts where they have a waste management company that already provides this service for free would then have to compost to try to cut out some of the money issues.
Yeah.
So she said that she was going to talk with Senator Palumbo and maybe offer a striker to last year's bill, which, to be honest, I don't really understand exactly what that means. Okay. Or whether they're just going to reintroduce a new bill written by her that incorporates those same ideas. So,
yeah, at times this is the funny thing that happens in real life as well as the classroom. If the legislator thinks that you guys know what you're doing, they start using the jargon that we all use. And sometimes you're like, what's a striker? A striker is shorthand for what's known as a striking amendment. So what happens in a striking amendment is you rewrite the bill.
Okay.
So since the bill has had a hearing, you can run a substitute for the bill. And there is if you go to the legislature's website, and your homework assignment from me will be that. I want you guys to become very conversant in the legislature's website. If you can go back to the homepage for a minute so they can see what the front door of that site looks like. While he's doing that, a striking amendment just does that. It modifies the bill and changes it over to a new version of the bill, and then that amended bill goes through the process. So what we're doing here is we're going back to the legislature's home site and showing you you're forbidden. I send it from an app. So here's the legislature's website when you go in through the front door. And so if you have a choice, you can go to the chamber, you can go to the Senate, you can find your district, you can look for statutes and rules, you can get bill information, and legislative agencies. Let's go to the Senate for a second in that application. So here we are with senators. You click on senators and it pops up all the members of the Senate and sorts them by district and alpha. And let's go ahead to Senator Cooterer, which is going to be down the list of ways here. Cooterer with a K. After Honeyford, after Hunt, Kaiser, there she is. So here's Senator Cooterer, and go ahead to her homepage. That's probably the easiest thing to do. So when you click, this is her homepage. And this talks about her and what her priorities are, and messaging that comes out of it. So for example, she has the lieutenant governor's announcing studies on colleges and everything else. Could you back out one page back to where we were before? So when you look at Senator Cooterer, you're gonna have to scroll back down to her. Yeah, I'm here behind a camera. My buddy is at a computer board behind the lights, so I'm calling stuff out. So why don't we go ahead and look at, so she's on the healthcare committee. She's on financial institutions and insurance and state government. So she's not on the committee of jurisdiction. Now let's scroll down to Senator Palumbo. We get to Guy Palumbo. He sits on higher education where he's ranking minority in local government. So that's another example of where we have to find somebody on the education committee. Let's see here. Can we back out one panel to the front page of the Senate? Can we go to, let's see here, committees, caucus. Why don't we go ahead back to senators and click on the entry for committee appointments. So we go back up to the top of the page, and there should be legislators by committee and committee assignments. Leadership and committee assignments is where we have to go. So go back to the senator front page where it says senators. This is kind of amusing, actually. So why don't you go ahead and click on senators where we were, and then you'll find at the bottom of this page will be a list of other menu options. So we should be able to find, let's go ahead with this legislative committees. Just click on the committees page there, and we'll just go to the Senate Education Committee. So Senate committees, education, early learning, K-12 education. So we'll go here. Let's click on, there should be members of the committee. They have not, that's right, they technically have not assigned committee members yet. So why don't we go to the electronic bill book, meeting documents, which is right there. So when you're trying to find a bill, it tells you all the committee hearings that we had, and then it goes into what we had last year. So this is how you find where something is. We do not have committee members yet, but I do believe that we have an idea of who will be chairing the Senate Education Committee, because Senator Rolfus, who would have chaired it, is now chairing Ways and Means. Krueger may be now the chair of the Education Committee, which expresses her interest in it. But if we're going to do the food composting bill, I have to dig the bill out. I have to go back to Senator Krueger, talk to her, Senator Palumbo, and get a game plan and report back to you. And I probably would have that ready before the end of the year, because I have to get this done before Christmas.
Sure.
So that's my plan. What are your, have you guys decided on a bill already, kind of, or do you need to discuss that further?
I mean, this sort of is part of the decision process. So I think this was a bill that Krueger picked up, and so we were thinking of heading in that direction. But as well, we're still waiting to see if Representative Goodman is interested in any of the other ideas. And then, as you just mentioned, we also have the capability to pick up an existing bill and lobby that, which I don't think was a large part of our consideration before this. So
no, you guys got, you had a member that said, I'd like to do your bill, and it's kind of difficult not to jump on that. And I think that's a really good plan A. And I think you guys should have a discussion amongst yourselves to decide if that's what the class would like to do. It's certainly easy for me. For the moment, I will check back with Representative Goodman and Senator Krueger about the conversations they've had with the class, and then get feedback, and I'll report back to you. I'll probably do that via email to Mr. Dawson, and he can share it to you, because I can get that done in 24 to 48 hours.
Okay.
Because we were thinking about having maybe a couple different options in play, because I have 4 sections of this year. So we can be working on kind of 2 different bills. We can have like our own bill and just be a lobbyist support for a different bill as well this year. So yeah, we're just kind of looking at different options.
Okay, very exciting. I like that. Questions? How are we doing for time, by the way?
I think we're okay on time.
We have about 12 minutes left. So questions?
All right. When you say lobbying, so are you talking about outreach and general education of the bill, or like when you say that we as a class would help lobby the bill, or you're going to sort of speak to, prime sponsors of the bill? What specifically does that entail?
Okay. Lobbying is, in this state, lobbying is a legal term. Okay. And lobbying is advocating for a law or policy or rule before an administrative or legislative body. That is to say, asking the legislature to pass a law, asking a state agency to modify an existing rule or to adapt a new rule, asking the governor for an executive order. Those are all lobbying. Lobbying in this state is governed by the Washington State Public Disclosure Commission. As a lobbyist, and you guys are more than welcome to go to www.pdc.wat.gov, and you can look me up and you can find out who I've represented, how much I've been paid, what issues I've worked on, and everything else. I encourage people to do that. Lobbying in this state has statutory exemptions of what's not lobbying. Okay, what is testifying before a public hearing is not lobbying. Meeting with legislators no more than 5 times during a legislative session is exempt from lobbying. Writing letters and communicating with legislators is not lobbying. Participating in forums and organizations is not lobbying. Basically, what it boils down to is if you're down knocking on doors day in and day out during the session, if you're outside the doors of the legislature writing notes and passing notes in, if you're calling legislators and asking them to run specific bills and you spend more than 5 days doing that, you've crossed into the zone of being a lobbyist. Now, college students and high school students generally are treated differently, with the exception of some narrow exceptions. For example, all the universities have student government legislative liaisons, as well as professional liaisons. Lake Washington School District belongs to the Washington State School Directors Association for the school board, WEA, Mr. Dawson's union, the Washington State, the school principals, their professional association, school retirees, which Mr. Dawson will be someday, although he's in his early 20s still. But anyhow, you have all these players that are all pushing and pulling on the same topics. Contract lobbyists work specifically for a client. In this case, I participate with TVW, and you're my client. Now, I don't have to file paperwork to have you sign an L1 or anything, but I do note your activities on my reports to the state so they know what I'm doing. And also the legislature generally knows when I show up on certain issues, and a bunch of cameramen come in because we film you guys coming down. They know what it's about. So in that regard, you guys are a real client, and we're really going to do something here with whatever choice you have. Okay. So that's that. Next question. Or more questions.
What types of tactics do you typically use, and like how do you go about your daily job?
I'll take the second part first.
Okay.
So I generally get up during session about 5 o'clock in the morning. I'll check overnight reports and email correspondence from people. A lot of people I work with work on the East Coast, so I'll be getting stuff, earlier in the morning that I respond to. I will check what's in the news that day. I will check, for example, the TVW broadcast schedule. I will generally be I'll be at the state capitol about 7 o'clock in the morning. It is still a paper-driven process, so I actually pick up the actual paper copies of bill introductions and reports from the previous day. I get a large cup of coffee. I sit in a corner and I review my paperwork and email correspondence. I sketch out my day. I may have, through the course of the day, I will have 2 major activities. I will be attending or participating in public hearings, or I will be meeting with legislators. And legislators, it's interesting. Eastern Washington Republican legislators take appointments as early as 7 o'clock in the morning, especially the farmers. They are early morning people. A lot of other legislators are commuting from Seattle or Tacoma, and so they actually don't roll in until 9, 10 o'clock in the morning. So they're trying to counter commute. So you'll see them. Committee hearings start at 8 o'clock in the morning, and then at 10 o'clock, and then at 1:30, and then at 3:30. And then when they're on the floor, they're generally on the floor from 10 o'clock in the morning till 6 o'clock at night, and then they may break for dinner and return, and the House will run up till midnight. The Senate, by rule, has to adjourn by 10 p.m. So there's a lot of night work as well. When you speak to tactics, it's a really, how do I put this? It's the closest analogy is salesmanship. It's persuasion. So you have a proposal, and it often has an identified group of supporters. Okay, and so you're in the process of finding legislators who are likely going to support the proposition, and you make sure that they're okay with the proposal, with the bill, that we didn't miss something that, like we run the composting bill, and somebody says, one of my friends that supports it, like Curtis says, there's this big piece that you guys didn't cover that has to be in the bill. Then we fix that problem. And then there's the wider audience of making sure that that the opposite party, the minority party, is okay with the bill or not going to hate it entirely. And then also you have to talk to the leadership, the speaker, the majority leader in the Senate, and the caucus chair, and see where they are. What type of priority is the bill going to be? Those are kind of the mandatory tasks. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that happens that is tactical and responsive. It's a very reactive business. You're often reacting to things that catch you by surprise. For example, everyone likes your bill, but they don't have time to hear it. But there's another bill that's kind of like your bill that's had a hearing. You may want to go talk to the supporters of that proposal. Hey, can we add our stuff to your bill? And then you decide if the bill becomes bigger. You see this a lot in Congress. When they talk about a Christmas tree bill, that's a proposal that Congress has much looser rules on what's subject matter. So that's why they hang all sorts of stuff on the budget that you go, Mars exploration, what's that doing? Well, we had to get the guy from Wyoming, and to do that, we had to hang this on the budget. That's an example at the federal level. At the state level, the topics are much more constrained, so you really can't go too far afield with a proposal. And then, of course, there's the other side of it, which is you run bills in both the House and Senate. It's standard practice, standard tactics, that if we run the composting bill, there will be a House version, Goodman, perhaps, and a Senate version, Cruderer. So we make sure that we always have a vehicle that we can move further along the process. So that's an example. How you act with the legislature changes as you get further into the session, particularly if your bill is stuck in two places. One, a revenue committee like Appropriations and Ways and Means. And then secondly, the big graveyard of bills, which is the Rules Committee. The Rules Committee is the committee that decides which bills leave committees and go out onto the floor for consideration. So the process is drafting of a bill, identifying a sponsor of a bill, introduction, step 3. Step 4, committee hearing. Step 5, executive action to get the bill out of committee. Step 6, A, rules, B, appropriations. Step 7, floor consideration and movement to the opposite body. Step 8, initial hearing in the opposite body. Step 9, executive action. Step 10, rules and/or appropriations, depending on the type of bill. Step 11, floor consideration. Step 12, final votes and sending back for approval. So it's a 12 to 13 step process. Basically, 6 to 7 steps each way, crossover, and repeat. Rinse, lather, repeat. So that's how you think about it. It's shaped by the calendar. It's also shaped by the external politics and feelings of the people you work with. It's a very human business, and everyone takes their job. Every legislator I know takes their job very seriously. So they all have to be treated with respect. And there's a lot of name calling and stuff on TV with talking heads and stuff. But when you actually work with elected officials, they're like faculty. Unless you got a point to prove, you generally respect the people that sign your grades, right? Kind of been my experience. Be nice to the guy who's going to give me an A or a C, and if you're not in the business of collecting C's. So yeah, that's kind of it in a nutshell. Next question. What are we doing for time? We are at
about 3 minutes, I think.
3 minutes left. One more question.
What do you think are the big issues Congress is going to be dealing with this session?
The legislature locally or in Washington, D.C.?
Locally.
There's two things they have to do that they haven't done yet. One is they have to pass a capital construction budget, which they didn't do last year. The second is they have to resolve a court case, a water policy case you may have heard of. It's called the Hurst Decision. And what it was a case out of Whatcom County. Hurst is a dairy farmer whose water rights are being affected by housing around him. So he and FutureWise went into court, and the state Supreme Court ruled that you can't issue water permits unless you guarantee there's water to permit. And the shorthand is you can't give away what you don't own in terms of water. Well, this set off the building industry and others in a tizzy because, water is not always definitive. Water changes. You have to change well. Sometimes you have to dig a deeper well, right? Sometimes you have to do different things. The weather and climate changes stuff. So there's now a whole bunch of uncertainty. One of the biggest water rights holders in this state are Indian tribes because, in order of succession of property rights in this country, the federal government is number one. Indian tribes and states are joint number two. Number three are senior water rights and property rights holders. That would include such people as Burlington Northern Santa Fe and Amtrak and Puget Sound Energy and the Bonneville Power Administration, utilities, transportation, because the railroads have property rights that go back to Abraham Lincoln. So you have this complexity. And then after that, you have senior water rights holders like farmers and longtime homesteaders. Like when you guys drive around rural Washington and you ever see Jones or Olson Road, you know what that means? It means that Mrs. Olson settled that land a long time ago. So that's a big problem. So they have to figure out water in the capital budget. Then they have a supplemental operating budget that is about $400 million. The state is bringing in more money than it's spending, but it has long-term obligations that they're worried about, such as pensions, health insurance, and paying for compensation of employees. And that is my answer, and that's the session. 4 seconds left. You guys are wonderful, and I'll see you when we're scheduled next time. Mr. Dawson.
Yes.
What's next?
Well, what do you think is next?
Well,
so
the Great Santa emergency is just in, oh my goodness.
So we're off on Friday.
Okay.
So we're off for break. So I'll have my kids start looking through some of those bill ideas. We'll hear back from Senator Cooterer, hopefully, about the composting idea, and we'll kind of go from there until we talk next year in January.
So this is our first and only date for this year. Oh my goodness. It hasn't time flown. So
it has.
We will meet again, Michael, in early January?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I will communicate via email, Mr. Dawson. I don't know if you guys chat with him during the break or not, but he'll have all my materials by the time you get back.
We can get together for coffee or something.
Yeah, no, we won't. So that'll be great. Yeah. I will pass along any needed information to them. So.
All right.
Okay.
You guys have
a great holidays and
Thank
nice
you so
seeing you.
much.
Y'all take care.
Bye.
Bye.